Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, book lovers. Looking for a unique and immersive way to experience a story? Check out the Flower Letters.
Imagine receiving 24 letters, rich with history, adventure, and romance, beautifully illustrated and delivered right to your mailbox over the course of a year.
In addition to the beautifully illustrated letters, each envelope is packed with extras like telegrams, postcards, coded messages, and maps, immersing you even further into another time and place.
And as a special offer to our listeners, use the code BOOKTALK for 10% off your subscription. Head on over to theflowerletters.com/booktalk to learn more and start your journey today.
Be sure to use the code BOOKTALK at checkout to save 10% on your order. That's BOOKTALK at checkout to save 10% today.
Again, that's theflowerletters.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on this unforgettable story experience.
Subscribe now and discover a new way to learn about history and connect with the past.
As the frozen lake melts around them, Feyre and Lucien are cornered by the Autumn Court Scions, beaten like animals before Cassian and Azriel swoop in to liberate them. Feyre announces her status as High Lady of the Night Court and spares her would-be captors from a dismal fate for the sake of gaining allies. Accompanied by her friends, Feyre is able to make a tearful reunion with Rhysand at home in Velaris, but prioritizes their intimacy over facing her now immortal sisters.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression, will recur throughout the podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you to all our Patreon supporters, with a special shout out to our February 2023 Trophy Wives. Thank you Amelade, Jessica, Helen, Danica, Carissa, Sylvie, Sierra, Colleen, Haley, Alexa, Sam, and Allison. To learn more about how to become a trophy wife, visit patreon.com/booktalk for book talk. Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we are exploring Sarah J. Maas's most ambitious novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series.
This is Jac.
And I'm Amy.
This week we're discussing chapters 13 through 15 in A Court of Wings and Ruin.
This week, we're reflecting on the question, what is the impact of previous misconceptions that perpetuate misunderstandings?
Themes that we'll see in today's episode include violence in love as well as Feyre's hypocrisy.
Chapter 13 begins with Feyre and Lucien running for their lives across the melting ice of the frozen lake, with Eris and his brothers hot on their heels. Literally.
Because he's literally hot.
I was thinking because he's got fire melting
fire
ice.
in his loins.
You and your problematic men.
I love it. I mean, yeah. I do and I don't.
The prose is short, punchy, staccato, making the reader feel like we're sprinting alongside Feyre and Lucien. It reminds me of the prose when Feyre ran from the Weaver in Mist and Fury.
Feyre is thinking like Feyre. As her and Lucien run across the ice, she says, quote, Eris had to either be expending all his power to get through millennia of ice, or was just doing it slowly to torture us. Feyre's mind goes to the possibility of torture because that's what she's been doing with Tamlin, a slow and painful torture. But let's be realistic here. Eris can't lose them again. The ice is solid, and it seems like no matter how powerful someone is, it's going to take a hot minute to melt millennia of ice. I think it's safe to say, no, Feyre, he's not doing this to torture you.
It's all about Feyre.
I know, like, oh my God, he must be trying to torture us. It's like, it's hard, okay? Don't give him that much credit. I also love the visual of Feyre and Lucien starting to zigzag run away from each other with flying arrows coming at them. It reminds me of the Battles of the Bastards episode in Game of Thrones, where Baby Stark starts running and you're just like, zag, zigzag. And then Amy, genuinely, I would like to imagine us trying to zigzag and run.
Well, obviously, I can't run right now.
Yeah, but like in a different, you'd scooting and zigzag, we would collide.
Yeah, we would for sure. I want to talk about an interesting visual. After Feyre is shot with an arrow and she rips it from her shoulder, quote, "My roar shattered and bounced across the ice." This visually makes me imagine Feyre's roar is like a glass vase that's been dropped on the ground, which shatters and then the pieces bounce and skitter away. Though the roar is powerful, this image also conveys a fragility about Feyre, because remember, she and Lucien have been traveling for more than a week without magic and with little food. They're pretty close to death here.
I didn't say this during our notes, but I want you to know I appreciate those notes. Those were really good.
Thank you.
Oh, you did a great job there. I also think it symbolizes the death to Feyre's inner animal. Now, I'm not saying that it's a permanent death, and I think her inner animal is going to come right back, but it's certainly broken. Plus, it's just an added badass imagery. Feyre gets so many badass points here. She's breaking an arrow. Like, she breaks it in half and pulls it out of her arm.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have the guts to do that.
Yeah, and TikTok just kind of dismisses her as a little bit more of a pushover. That's
a little ragamuffin.
Yeah, ragamuffin. Oh my God. Why does that make me hungry for muffin?
It made me hungry, and then I thought about Rhysand eating her out. That's why she's
eating her muffin. I'm just bluffing with my muffin.
Feyre knows she and Lucien are close to death. She's intimidated by Eris here because she equates him to a wolf. Remember from Mist and Fury, when Feyre views individuals, including herself, as being the ultimate predator in a situation, she views that individual as a wolf or having wolf-like features. This continues to be the case in Wings and Ruin. We saw this in the Spring Court chapters when Feyre would let some of the wolf show when she smiled at Ianthe. But here the tables have turned. Eris is the one smiling like a wolf at Feyre as he corners her on the ice. Let's talk about how Eris chooses to fight Feyre. Feyre is weak. She runs from Eris rather than trying to fight with her blades because she knows she's weak. Eris, instead of fighting her with weapons, chooses to, in order, backhand her face, punch her gut, grab her hair, and drag her across the ice. I'm sorry, but this is not the kind of violence you perform on another warrior you respect. This is the kind of violence a man performs against a woman he does not respect. There is something especially degrading about it that makes it easy to dislike Eris and assume the worst about his interactions with Mor.
Yeah, I revoke his hot statement right here. Take it back. And you're spot on. This screams violence against women rather than someone you're fighting. It is barbaric and terrifying.
There's also something about the scene that is very reminiscent of Amarantha and Under the Mountain, at least to me. After Feyre stabbed Tamlin under the mountain in Thorns and Roses, Amarantha began to physically torture human Feyre, slamming her against the ground with magic as Rhysand screamed her name. Though the method of violence is different here, Feyre, who has been taken back to her human weakness, is being beaten and dragged along the floor as Lucien shouts her name. And that's what takes me back to Under the Mountain.
I'm also going to argue that this is the first intimate attack that Feyre's experienced. And what I mean by that is that this is the first attack by someone who is not outwardly a monster. She's been beaten up before, but it's been by the Adder and other monsters. But Feyre hasn't had this type of up-close, intimate violence from someone who looks like her, humanoid. Also, another call-out, quote, "A backhanded blow to the face, so hard my teeth went through my lip." Teeth went through her lip? Which tooth, Amy?
So I have had a brother who was not in a fight but fell off the stairs.
Nope.
And
nope.
Bit through his lip.
Mm-mm.
So I would say bottom teeth through the bottom lip.
It's just, I mean, she writes that detail and we just never get it back again, where I just feel like SJM just kind of drops a little traumatizing fact for me. And I never get that.
Something for you to obsess about now.
When I'm imagining where she starts talking to Eris now and she's saying, "I am High Lady of the Night Court," but there's a little whistle because there's a hole in her lip now. "I am High Lady of the Night Court."
I don't think that's how it works, but
okay.
You keep imagining it
She's
that
just
way.
whistling through the hole in her lip. To continue with the themes that violence seems particularly against women, let's look at how Aerys holds her down. He gags her with fire and chains her wrists with flames as well. I'm not saying men can't be gagged and handcuffed, but with the hair pulling, the gag, the cuffs, there's a violent sexual undertone. And I'm wondering if this is who Aerys is or if it's for show. Is Aerys treating Feyre this way because he believes her to be sexually promiscuous, hopping from Tamlin to Rhys to Tamlin to Lucien?
I don't believe Aerys to have that moral high ground. I view Aerys, and what we know of Aerys later on is that he wants to be High Lord. And he puts on a show for Baron and his brothers. And it's all about protecting himself. So he's got this mask on. And if you think about Baron, High Lord of the Autumn Court, beats his wife.
Yeah.
And so to qualify for High Lord, does Aerys believe he has to beat women?
It's almost as if he knows his brothers are watching. All of the other army guys from the Autumn Court start popping up on the edge of the ice. It's like he knows, I need to represent my father in this moment.
Yeah, I have to be as strong, or if not stronger than my father. Yeah. And this is my father.
Not justifying his actions, just understanding it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's his only motivation.
I hope so. Because I think, later on, we get enough clues that he's not a bad guy.
Yeah.
So it's just his actions here contradict what we see later.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to understand his mindset.
Yep. Then Cassian and Azriel arrive. Feyre begins, quote, crying in earnest, some leash I'd kept on myself snapping free. Feyre's comparing herself to an animal here, leashed and wounded, not unlike Tamlin once was in Thorns and Roses. What's fascinating is that when, quote, Cassian drew twin Illyrian blades, the sight of them felt like home. Violence is love for Feyre, and if this particular quote doesn't convince you, nothing will.
Nothing. We can't help you.
No.
Violence and loyalty. Here, Cassian and Azriel, who both were willing to die and almost did die for Feyre. But Feyre also respects strength. Cassian's drawing weapons, and he's already differentiating himself from Aerys. Cassian is a warrior. He's going to use weapons, while Aerys was a little bitch boy slapping her around. We also get the famous line, quote, I suggest you drop my lady. I don't think that's how he said it, but, something along those lines. Either way, chills.
It's hot.
Very hot.
Here's something that's even more mind-boggling to me. Cassian is wrathful at the sound of Feyre's whimper, but instead of coming to her aid immediately, he gives her an almost reproachful look, what Feyre calls, quote, a silent command for Feyre to help herself before he intervenes. At the time I wrote these notes, I couldn't wrap my hand around it, but I think we should discuss this.
It's a great point, and when I read this part, I also was kind of taken aback. I take it as Cassian being mad at Feyre for even being in this position. We know later that Cassian is in fact mad at Feyre for not telling him and everyone that she's High Lady of the Night Court. And this is a small moment where that anger shines. Granted, it's done in the form of protection and empowerment. He wants Feyre to take back some control to prove to herself that she is strong and capable of getting out of Aerys's hold if she wants to. But I think there are definite undertones of Cassian resenting Feyre for even being in this position because she was never honest with them.
And I don't know that I blame him.
No.
It's hard because this really ugly violence has been enacted against Feyre, but Feyre has the skills, and instead of utilizing those skills, she's allowing herself to be a victim.
Yeah. You know when you love someone and they hurt themselves and you almost get mad at them for hurting themselves?
Yeah. Don't look at me.
Where else am I gonna look? I mean, it happens to me all the time when, if I get hurt, my mom gets frustrated.
Yeah.
Because it's like you love them so much, you just want to punch them.
Yeah, that was so stupid.
Why are you hurt? Get better. I hate this.
Yeah. So when Feyre fights back, she goes for Aerys's nose, and I love it because it again makes me think of Under the Mountain when the adder broke Feyre's nose, and something about it feels very full circle to me. Cassian beats Aerys so thoroughly when they fight with their blades that Cassian stabs Aerys in the gut. Quote, blood, red as rubies, stained the ice and snow. Though Feyre once hated jewels, she appreciates them now, doesn't shy away from the gifts that they've become. In some ways, Cassian has given Feyre a gift here, and I'm going to say she loves it.
Yeah. It's also reminiscent of Tarquin's blood rubies, too. It's Feyre putting her own death promise against Aerys. Feyre tries to find her inner power, calling for the ice in her veins to smother the fire gag. Quote, ice to smother, to sing to sleep. I don't know if this requires a trigger warning, but I'm going to put a trigger warning for parental abuse. I read this line and it gives me chills because to me it sounds like a parent who's going to, harm their child to death.
To death.
It hurts to say it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
I know what you mean.
The you're going to smother it.
Yeah.
And you're going to sing it to sleep. It's oddly nurturing as well as killing-y. Murdery.
Yeah, it has murder vibes.
Murder vibes, nurture vibes.
Yeah, it is spooky when you think about it. I never really paid attention to it, but it is spooky.
Spooky.
Feyre finally gets the good sense to be forward-thinking and stops Cassian and Azriel from killing everyone. I get why, but I don't see this current Feyre as being very politically minded. And so what brings this about? What reminds her that, quote, she had other weapons to use?
I mean, to me, I read this and I just thought this was the first rational and strategic thought that Feyre's had this entire book so far.
Right. And why is that the case? It's only because she doesn't have magic. Otherwise, she would be using her magic right now.
True.
And I think that says a lot about Feyre, that she's magic first, politics second.
It's true. She's going to come in, magic this shit up, apologize later.
Yeah, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
I mean, if she even asks for forgiveness.
Yeah, she doesn't.
She really doesn't.
Nope.
I want to call out a moment of good writing that oh so smoothly does a great job to show how different two characters are without calling it. This is after Feyre gives the soft, cold command to stop, and Azriel and Cassian obey. Love the language that they obeyed, by the way. Quote, Lucian himself was panting, sword still raised, as Azriel flicked the blood off his own blade and stalked towards me. In writing classes, you hear the phrase, show not tell, a lot. And this is a perfect example of that. Lucian is panting, still in mid-motion, while Azriel carelessly flicks the blood off his blade. Then it's described as he's stalking towards Feyre, like he's a predatorial animal. It's just a fun writing lesson moment where, I read that and I can just hear creative writing 101 of show not tell.
Yeah. Yeah, because what is it showing? It's showing that Lucian is less fit and less trained. And for Azriel, this is like, nothing.
I know. Oh my God. She's making me stop. I was just in my zone.
Right? I was just warming up.
Feyre then removes the glamour from her arm. And I have questions here, Amy. A lot of questions that haunt me in the late nights. Does this mean that despite Feyre losing her magic, the glamour was still in place? So once the magic has been casted, it can't be removed unless uncasted? Also, how did Lucian not see it with his fancy eye? I mean, he says that it's supposed to see through glamour. So then why does his face drain of color as if he hadn't seen it? Also, before you get to answer my questions, with Lucian's reaction, I mean, so all of a sudden she gets to show everyone my tattoos. And then he's just, oh my goodness, as if he knows what it's supposed to mean, as if he's familiar with it. I mean, does it match Rhys's tattoos? It's like, how would he know?
Yeah, I have so many questions about this, and it's all very questionable. Let me work in reverse order. The tattoos are always described as being Illyrian tattoos. So how does Lucian know what Illyrian tattoos mean? And how is there an Illyrian tattoo for High Lady when they're so misogynistic?
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Thanks. I recently reviewed our inbox, and we have a couple readers who have theories that Lucian could see the glamour and could see her tattoos, and so he always knew and he was always playing along. And I'm like, I mean, as you call out,
his face pales.
Yeah, he obviously didn't see through the glamour. So was she wearing long sleeves the whole time?
Maybe, or maybe he's paling because now his brothers can see it.
Oh, maybe
and
now
she's
his brothers
revealing herself. But again, I don't think that would call for a paling. To me, that's just oh shit, it's gonna hit the fan now.
Right. And then lastly, how does the glamour stay in place? I vaguely remember, and I don't remember what chapter, maybe chapter 1. When Feyre's painting, she pointedly looks at her arm and talks about the glamour she maintains to keep her tattoo covered. And so if she's maintaining the glamour, how can you maintain the glamour with no magic? I don't know. So many questions.
Yeah. But this is a fantasy book, but it's not, what is it, not high fantasy where it's just super detailed with a very elaborate magic system, which honestly, I get it. I respect it.
Yeah.
Writing magic system sucks.
Yeah. Coming up with your magic system and adhering to the rules of your magic system when it doesn't work with the plot points that you need is really freaking annoying.
Yeah.
I can speak from personal experience. So I get it. I get choosing to not worry about the rules of the magic. But as a reader who cares about that stuff, it's really difficult for me.
It is.
I have another question for our questioning.
Let's just question each other. It's fine.
Why do we learn Lucian's last name here? Mm-hmm. He's the only High Fae whose family name we learn. So why include it? Why is it important for us to know this now? The only thing I can think of is that maybe it's because Lucian's parentage will be called into question later that we keep getting his family name rubbed in our faces.
So I thought it was weird too, that it just came out of nowhere, and it's also kind of a weird last name, and I'm excited to go into this with you. So his last name is Vansera, and since our listeners are really good at diving into names, I thought I'd be inspired and did a little digging myself. So immediately the Van part sticks out to me because in Dutch that's from, it's just a very Van something, right?
Yep.
So then I was just wondering, what does Sarah mean? Sarah in Italian means greenhouse, as in planting, as in Elaine.
Okay.
And now, if you look more into this with Elaine and Lucian and that it's another connection, I also want to point out that Elaine and Lucian both mean light.
Yeah, so I know you were really excited to share this note with me, and one of our listeners in an email pointed out that Lucian means light.
I mean, no, they're great. I love you guys.
But I read it. It was the wrong time for me to read it.
Damn it. But okay, how about the fact that his last name means greenhouse and gardening? Know that. Yeah.
That's
so
crazy.
It's from the garden is what his last name is.
Yeah, it's crazy.
From the garden, Amy.
No, I mean, it's so annoying, and I'm going to keep making points about why Lucian and Elaine are OTP, and I hate it.
And again, people on TikTok make good arguments of why does Elaine even have to end up with someone? Because this is a romance novel. I don't know how to, hear me out. I get it. She doesn't need to end up with anyone. But let's not fool ourselves. I mean,
you
SJM...
came here for romance.
Yeah, we're here for romance. And SJM has said that she is a happily ever after type of writer. She's going to end up with someone. It's not everyone walks away alone.
Yeah. And all signs point to Lucian, as much as I despise it. But I'm going to keep making good points about why they're going to end up together.
Remember, there was a live that we did one time, and it was before we started reviewing notes, and I said something of, this entire book is just pointing why Elaine and Lucian are together, and you said, I don't know, I feel like it points to Azriel.
I'm going to make points about why it points to Azriel later, but I can't deny all the points about it pointing to Lucian as well.
It's just so aggressive at this point.
It's very aggressive. One last note before we move on to the next scene. I love the little reunion between Feyre and Cassian here. It really speaks to their relationship, which we saw begin in Mist and Fury, and in my view speaks to the further relationship Feyre will develop with Cassian and with Azriel in this novel.
And we have the age-old question here. How did Azriel carry Lucian? Was it princess style? Was it koala style, where Lucian just wraps his legs to the front of Azriel and they go face to face?
Or it could be like a sack of potatoes, a fireman carry, and Lucian's ass is right next to Azriel's face.
Is Azriel an ass man?
I
Gives
think
it a good slap.
I think so.
Hell
Elaine's
yeah.
got small tits.
Yeah, it's true. He is an ass man.
He must be an ass man.
Time for me to go back to squatting at the gym. Tons of squats.
When Cassian and Feyre land in the sacred neutral lands in the middle of Prythian, Mor is there waiting, and Feyre launches into a sprint to hug the blonde. I have a note in my book that says, quote, debunks Jac's theory that Feyre hates Mor, ? And I'm really interested to see how Jac defends her theory now.
All right. Look, in all fairness, at the end of Mist and Fury at season 2, I was saying that Feyre was beginning to respect Mor, but who am I to walk away from a challenge? Challenge accepted. Let's do this. The description of Mor right away signals something is off. Quote, the blonde female in Illyrian leathers pacing between the gnarled trees. What is it that Illyrians do? They fight. They are warriors. And then the fact that Mor is next to a gnarled tree, something that's not the form that it should be, just like Mor is not the form that she should be right now. Feyre is also pointing out that Mor is a fraud by calling out the leathers in total contradiction to fighting. Feyre doesn't even ask how Mor is doing. She immediately asks, where is he? But that's literally it. when I read this initially, and I still think it's a sweet moment, but, I'll interpret it.
Good job.
Thank you.
It is a sweet moment between Mor and Feyre. I have to acknowledge, though, Mor keeps the truth of where Rhys is from Feyre. Something to note now, but we'll discuss when we get into the next chapter.
What I would like to note is the time and description that SJM takes to show that Mor wasn't even able to help Feyre because of the idea of seeing Eris was too much. Quote, to avoid an interaction with Eris that Mor was perhaps not ready for. SJM is setting us up to feel the exact same anxiety for later in the book when Eris pops up again and how it's going to hurt Mor. Looking back, it's so obvious what was going to happen at this moment. I mean, it's all hindsight, right? But it's a little baby groundwork that's happening. It's sneaky. It's it was just too hard for Mor. Of course we're going to see Eris then, and she's going to be forced in that. It was just one of those, when I read it, I was imagining, damn it, I should have known.
Should have known that Eris was going to come back.
Yeah.
It's also very characteristic of Feyre. That quote that you read is just Feyre projecting. She's not wrong, but to avoid an interaction with Eris that Mor was perhaps not ready for, that's Feyre. That's Feyre making assumptions.
Yeah. I mean, but we all, there's so many rumors. No, they're not theories. Rumorizing amongst ourselves as listeners and readers. But there's so many theories that Eris let Mor go because he alludes to that. And the fact that Mor knows it. Yeah. So there's potentially, it's not the stress of, oh my God, I can't handle looking at him. But oh my God, my secret's going to come out.
Yep. And she's not ready for that.
Yeah.
Let's examine Mor's excuse for not going with Cassian and Azriel to extract Feyre. While it is plausible her presence at the border kept the Winter Court distracted from their true purpose, Mor conveys shame and guilt, which Feyre picks up on. But Feyre does not shame Mor for her cowardice, for not being willing to confront Eris. Having just experienced violence at Eris's hands, I think Feyre truly understands why Mor stayed away. Or at least Feyre fills in the blanks and makes her assumptions, projections about why Mor would want to stay away from Eris since he's a disrespectful prick. It's not uncharacteristic how Feyre is so empathetic and forgiving in this moment, despite her not having all the information and therefore making inferences. I'm curious how this might change in the future once we really know what happened between Mor and Eris. Sadly, we're a few years and maybe a few books away from that.
I was going to say something, but not everyone's caught up on all the books, so keep it to myself and I'll talk to you about it later, Amy.
Okay. I do want to point out... Remember last season, during the Mortal Realm chapters, I got all hot and bothered at the visual of Azriel slamming down when Rhys caught the adder in Mist and Fury and all the snow flurries casting.
We all got hot and bothered with that, yeah.
But I was specifically like, he slams down and the snow flurries come out.
Oh, yeah.
He does it again here.
Oh, that man and his snow flurries.
Quote, Azriel and Lucian landed. Plumes of snow sprang in
Plumes.
Wake.
This time it's plumes.
I'm convinced Feyre finds Daddy Azzy and his snow flurries hot.
I'm convinced you find snow hot, just in general.
And Daddy Azzy.
And Daddy Azzy.
Mor looks to Lucian to determine if it's okay to take him to Velaris. Feyre thinks, quote, I almost pitied Lucian for the weight of her gaze, the utter judgment, the stare of the Morrigan, whose gift was pure truth. But how does it work?
No.
I'm not convinced it's a real thing. And, does SJM actually even know?
I can't with this gift at all. You go back to the queens and how she was with them and trying to get the orb and everything and prove to them that they're all good guys. And so what? She didn't check? She didn't check to see if they're deceiving her? And at one point later on in this book, Jurian tells her, you didn't check. Are you telling me you're not checking at every point when you're with enemies? That's the dumbest shit, that you're with your enemy. You're trapped. You're trapped in this room with the King of Hybern. Everything's going tits up. And you didn't check to see the truth out of everyone.
Right. I would be doing that nonstop every day, all day.
I know. And it would hurt my feelings if I did that.
Maybe she's a sensitive flower and can't.
And I mean, I get not doing it on the daily where you just pop up and you're thinking, hey, Cassian, how do I look in this dress? You look great. But in moments of crises and being a fighter and being a contributor to all this.
Yeah.
Maybe you fucking contribute.
I don't know.
What has she done? I'm trying to think of her fighting. She fights.
She doesn't fight until this book.
Oh my God. One day we'll have a book about Mor and we'll be obsessed.
Until then,
check yourself before you wreck yourself more. I don't know who I said that to. I was going to say Tess Jam, but again, I want her to listen to this and I don't want her to be mad.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it will all make sense in time. In the context of this book, it does not make sense.
Yeah.
Feyre returns with her family to Velaris, and chapter 14 opens with the thought that before this moment, Feyre had not allowed herself to imagine being back in the townhouse. Quote, when I'd hear the song of the gulls soaring high above Velaris, smell the brine of the Sidra River that wended through the heart of the city, feel the warmth of the sunshine streaming through the windows. I want to take a moment to analyze these 3 images that Feyre calls out. Let's start with the song of gulls soaring high above Velaris. Feyre loves flying with Rhysand, a love that she developed in Mist and Fury. And as we know, she'll learn to fly on her own throughout the course of this novel. Flying is part of what feels like home. It is a freedom she never had before coming to Velaris. Then there's the brine of the Sidra River. Feyre's first strong magical affinity was to water. In the battle for Velaris in Mist and Fury, she used the Sidra to make water wolves and other predators that attacked the Hybern soldiers. It's a symbol of her at her strongest. And then there's the warmth of the sunshine. Feyre and Rhys are night incarnate in many ways, but during this season, I'm going to point out times when this changes. We're going to see how sunlight symbolizes truth, the removal of the mask that the inner circle wears so that they are truly themselves with others. For now, though, the sunshine is only felt at home in Velaris, where Feyre and her family feel safest to be themselves.
Lucien goes all Mad-Eye Moody and starts looking through all of the walls and doors with his magical eye. The fact that they land in the foyer of the townhouse and there are sounds of children in the streets laughing and no screaming and no darkness, it's very reminiscent of when Feyre first arrived.
And I just want to say, remember this for a point I make later.
Mm-hmm.
Lucien's first comment upon arrival in the townhouse is that he can hear children laughing in the street. Quote, he said it with such quiet surprise, as if he hadn't heard the sound in a long, long time. What a heartbreaking thought that children are so rare and were locked away for safety because of Amarantha prior to this. This is a reminder of how many years of trauma Lucien and the rest of Prythian have endured. It is also a reminder of how special Velaris is and how key it is to Lucien's relationship with the Night Court moving forward.
When Rhys enters the scene, we can see that his mask is on because Lucien's there. Rather than running to Feyre immediately, Rhys has to casually lean against the archway and doesn't call out for Feyre. Instead, he confirms Feyre is the High Lady by saying, indeed she is. If it was just the inner circle, Rhys would have grabbed Feyre immediately without her even noticing. Instead, his mask only breaks when Feyre breaks, which is immediate. And that's when Rhys shows who he is in front of Lucien. That's when he kneels for Feyre. Quote, Rhys knelt before me, knee to knee.
Which, interestingly enough, comes up again during sex.
When you first told me, I was so confused. I was just thinking, Amy, how does it reach?
How do they have sex?
How do they knee to knee? How does it reach?
I was just thinking of the shadow dildo from episode, whatever episode that was.
Asriel could reach.
What we see next is a direct parallel to the start of Mist and Fury. Let me remind you of the scene in question. After Feyre's first visit to the Night Court in Mist and Fury, she greets Tamlin and wants to have sex with him to comfort herself after a week away from him. However, Tamlin denied her and instead insisted that Feyre provide him with all the details she could recall of the Night Court, essentially asking her to serve the role of spy. Now, when Feyre is reunited with Rhys after more than a month away as a spy in the Spring Court, Rhys takes Feyre to their bedroom. So when Feyre asks, quote, do you want to go over what happened at the Spring Court? Feyre is recalling how Tamlin treated their reunion way back when.
What I love about this moment is that you're right. This is Feyre thinking back on Tamlin, even though she's not specifically comparing Rhys to Tamlin. But I don't think it's meant to show the difference between Tamlin and Rhys, but rather the similarities between Feyre and Tamlin. We said in the first few episodes that Feyre and Tamlin are now very similar, and we can see that in this moment again.
That's fair, and to some extent, it's almost, by showing us how similar Feyre and Tamlin have become, it's also showing us how different Feyre's become from Rhysand.
But I was just thinking, remember in Mist and Fury, when Feyre and Rhys and co were on their way to the Night Court, and then Feyre said something about, we don't want to look weak. Mm-hmm. And it was such a Tamlin thing to say that, you know, Feyre you don't give enough credit to how similar you are to Tamlin.
And I don't know that it's conscious. I wonder to what extent she just assumes the way that Tamlin operated was the right way to operate.
Yes.
Like, it's like she's almost been brainwashed to think this way, and she doesn't know any better.
But we also said in the first book that they got together because they were so similar.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I think that there was groundwork in Thorns and Roses of them being similar, of being thrusted into the power, like younger, and then being put into the power position and being in a role that they don't want to be in. There's more to it than that.
Yeah.
You know, we said that Rhys and Tamlin were the same side of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
Feyre, you know, it's a three-person coin.
It's a three-sided coin.
It's a three-sided coin.
We also have to remember, Feyre's 20 and naive.
Oh, which just then makes Tamlin look bad because he's like a naive 20-year-old.
Right, but he's like 400 and something.
Yeah.
But I think that also speaks to why she assumes certain things that are just like, no, we don't do that. Or we don't care about that.
Yeah.
My note. And this is where we see a big difference between Tamlin and Rhys. So, in that vein, where Tamlin was more concerned about Rhys after Feyre's return, Rhys is more interested in Feyre than in Tamlin. Quote, no amusement, nothing but that predatory intensity focused on my every breath. There are other things I'd rather do first.
Is that your Rhys voice?
I was on the spot, yeah.
It had some Amryn in it.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
I'll work on my Rhys voice.
Okay.
Another way to look at this, Tamlin was interested in the cause and protecting his court, while Rhys is more interested in getting laid. But if you look at that from the perspective of power, it indicates to me that Tamlin felt powerless because he lacked information, while Rhys is confident in the information that he already has.
Then we can see that sex is power, more powerful than knowledge, because no matter how much Rhys knows, he doesn't know every detail of what happened in the spring court. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Excellent point.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't know everything that happened. They barely communicated.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've always talked about information, knowledge being power and maybe being the ultimate power. But right now, Rhys is proving otherwise.
Yeah. I love it because Rhys is just thinking, you know, I'll get this knowledge in a second.
Yeah.
You know what I'm not going to get in a second? This punani. I don't know.
Before we get to the punani, Feyre and...
Where is that even from? Is it an actual slang for it?
Yeah, I think so.
But where? I'll Google it later.
I always think of poutine, which is a Canadian dish.
So it's what Canadians call vaginas?
No, punani, I think, is Pacific Island.
I mean, hold on. Give me a second. So it definitely means vagina in my quick search where I refuse to click on anything. Yeah, it is a Pacific Islander word for pussy.
Look at that.
Wow.
I have knowledge.
We're so cultured. Good for us. I mean, personally, I prefer the Canadian poutine A. Do you want to get some poutine A? And
Actually, poutine is a delicious dish.
I want to hit that poutine and that punani A.
Oh my gosh. All the Canadians are going to be so offended.
I know, and they're our second most listened country. I'm
Third.
so sorry. All right, well. Come up to second and I'll try harder.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry. I had caffeine.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
We love our Canadians.
We do love our Canadians.
We do.
Before we get to the spice, Feyre and Rhys have a little moment to catch up with one another. We first learn that Rhys went looking for Feyre in the spring court. Quote, by the time I got to... Now I feel like I need a Rhys voice. By the time I got to...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll do it. I can't look at you, though.
No, I'm not going to do a Rhys voice. Quote, by the time I got to the spring court, you'd vanished. Tamlin was raging through that forest, hunting for you. But you hid your scent. And even I couldn't find you. First off, Jack and I had a very long discussion about this.
Yeah. And if you want to hear about that discussion, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah, where you can hear it during our prep session. First off, Rhys blames Feyre for his inability to find her. He couldn't find her because she hid her scent. It doesn't occur to him that there's another explanation. Granted, Rhysy Boy was anxious and worried about Feyre, but it annoys me. Let me just explain myself a little bit more. I infer that Feyre did not hide her scent because Feyre's response is she could not be found because her magic is gone from the Feybane. If we assume that scent is tied to magic and Feyre's magic is gone, therefore she didn't hide it, it was taken from her. But let's say this isn't true. Let's say scent is not tied to magic. Then the scent disappeared because Feyre went to the Autumn Court. She still didn't hide it. She just disappeared from the area.
But this doesn't make sense because he would have sniffed it all the way to the entrance of the Autumn Court.
Right.
And I mean, again, this isn't me fighting Amy, guys. This is me fighting the magic. Because it just doesn't make sense because are you telling me that if you don't have magic, you don't stink?
Or you don't have a personal odor?
Yeah.
Pheromones?
Exactly.
I don't know, but my point is nowhere does it say Feyre hid her scent.
No, you're right. You're right. It doesn't. I mean, and I feel like that would have been a good thing that Feyre said something where, and with my last bit of magic, I disguised our scent, you know?
Yeah.
But then again, it comes to the question of when your magic leaves you,
Can you still keep it hidden?
Yeah, because it still stay hidden.
No, it can't.
I don't know, Amy. I don't know.
So, okay. So let's ignore everything I just said.
Mm-hmm. Done. Easy. No, I'm sorry.
To hide her scent, she has to have magic because you use magic to hide your scent.
Yeah.
She doesn't have magic.
She doesn't have magic, but
she couldn't hide her scent. So stop blaming her, Rhys.
I know. I mean, yes, at the end of the day, let's not blame her. I mean, it could have very easily have been Tamlin who hid her scent, not wanting any of his sentries to go after her necessarily.
Interesting.
You know, like maybe he's trying to make it not seem like she ran away or something, and he kind of loses it and his rage goes off. But then again, that can't be it because the twins said that they poisoned everyone.
Right.
So then Tamlin didn't have What is happening?
I don't know.
The math doesn't math. And, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, Feyre knew that her power was leaving, right? In those last moments. I mean, in those moments, that's when she was debating, do I winnow and leave Lucien or do I do something?
Right.
Maybe in that moment, you just say, honey, baby, sweetheart, losing all my magic.
Gonna go to the Autumn Court.
Meet you there. You could have just pushed that out. It's a thought. It's a thought.
Yeah. It would have gotten to him eventually, right?
Yeah. It takes a while.
I don't know.
I'm walking away. And by walking away, I mean scrolling down to your second point.
Yeah. My second point. Feyre responds to Rhys's worry with the thought, quote, the snag in his words was a knife to my gut. This could be guilt that Rhys was worried about Feyre. But in my mind, it's also a twisted confirmation that love is violence for Feyre. These two love each other so much that when they worry for one another, it's like being stabbed in the gut. To continue on with the theme of love and violence, Rhys is pleased that Feyre killed the Hybern commanders, and Feyre acts innocent when Rhys talks about Ianthe's hand. In response to her obvious lie, Rhys not only plays along, but is also pleased by the outcome. In some ways, he's given his blessing for Feyre's actions at the Spring Court, which I can't wait to discuss in next week's episode because I've already started my notes on this.
Woo! When Rhys plays along with the idea, because Feyre tries to be all coy and playful about what she did to Ianthe, and she says, but she fell.
Right.
Oh, poor girl. And Rhys plays along with the idea of a fall, and he rewards Feyre by tempting her. Quote, the heat of his body seeping into me while his hands migrated from my shoulders to brush lazy lines down my back. I bit my lip, focusing on his words and not arching into his touch. And then Rhys goes, now I have to do a Rhys voice. She's currently convalescing after her ordeal, apparently. Won't leave the temple.
It just sounds like you.
I thought I was so good in that moment.
You did a great job, but it just sounded like you to me.
I genuinely was feeling myself so hard, thinking I'm just like Rhys. I'm like, wow.
You said it with swagger.
I thought I was badass. I was like, I did a great Rhys voice.
You said it with so much swagger, but it was Jack swagger.
I will never be able to recreate that in reality now.
I'm sorry.
That's a shame. Yeah, Ianthe is convalescing right now. Her hand was smashed. She was forced to smash her own hand. You know, doing this to Ianthe is well-deserved. I don't see how this is an aphrodisiac. But again, we've proven violence is love and sex and horniness.
Right. Just like killing the Naga was a turn-on and the bloody shirt was a turn-on for Feyre and Tamlin, Ianthe smashing her hand is a turn-on for Feyre and Rhys.
I mean, maybe because I haven't dated a single guy who I felt confident could even throw a punch. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I feel so bad because one of them's going to listen to this.
He knows it.
He knows it. You know, nothing against you. None of them are I'm going to crush someone's hand and punch them. I'm sure if there was a glint of death in their eyes, I'd feel more horny for it.
So as Feyre and Rhys start to get horny for each other, Feyre thinks, quote, perhaps one of those pretty acolytes of Ianthe's would get sick of her sanctimonious bullshit and smother Ianthe in her sleep. Sex and death, hand in hand. Like, why is she thinking about Ianthe dying while she's getting her sex on with Rhys?
I know.
To Feyre's credit, she does stop to think about her sisters before she has sex with Rhys, though she does opt to not go and see them just yet.
Feyre's response to this is funny, and when I say funny, I mean annoying as hell. Things are heating up between Feyre and Rhys, and she stops things to ask about her sister. Rhys says that he'll take her to them, but it's described as, quote, every word seemed to be an effort. Feyre thinks, but he would. I realized he shoved down his need for me and take me to them. If that was what I wanted, my choice. It had always been my choice with him. I get Rhys is horny and hasn't seen her in a while and wants to claim and mark her. He doesn't get brownie points for being willing to not have sex, especially since Feyre just had the shit beaten out of her. Is her lip still even whole right now?
Right.
Is he going to tongue it? That little hole?
He's going to penetrate the hole with his tongue.
You like that, baby? You like that?
Gosh.
Ew. I hate everything that we just said. But, like, you get what I'm saying here, where she's been through something. She's been living in enemy territory. She may not be ready to have sex, and granted, she is clearly ready to have sex, but the point remains, you don't get brownie points for not having sex. You don't get to say, wow, it's always been my choice. Yeah, it should be your choice.
Right,
it's your
exactly.
fucking body, and your sisters have gone through their own shit.
Yeah, there's so much, there's so many problems, and we're just going to get into it.
I'm so angry this episode.
We then get to the part where Feyre discovers Rhys was spying on the mortal queens alone. He tries to dodge giving Feyre an answer, the same information Mor refused to give Feyre in the last chapter, and instead uses sex as a tool to distract Feyre. But Feyre learned the art of quid pro quo in Mist and Fury. Rhys can get his sex when Feyre gets her information. This is the eternal power struggle of this couple. This is where we see a very important theme in this novel, and I'm going to point it out every time it comes up. Feyre is mad Rhys went alone, to which Rhys responds, quote, I'd rather it be me. I can't take myself seriously.
This episode, man.
I'd rather it be me than any of the others. That feels like a Cassian voice.
Does it?
No, it doesn't.
Does that sound like a Cassian voice to you?
It doesn't. I can't take myself seriously. We're going to cut all of that.
No, it's staying in.
I'd rather it be me than any of the others. That had been his problem from the start. Always him, always sacrificing. Remember this, in combination with the prologue of researching for Cassian among the dead Illyrians. This theme is going to be important as we proceed.
It's also a beautiful moment of hypocrisy. Feyre really doesn't hear herself when she gets mad at him for going alone to the mortal lands, and for Rhys willing to sacrifice himself. It's a match made in heaven. Feyre's been in the spring court this entire time, and she sacrifices herself all the time. Do you not see your words, Feyre?
It's interesting. Feyre is painted as always having low self-worth and always thinking she needs to sacrifice herself because she puts everyone else on a pedestal.
The dichotomy of this book is us thinking Feyre is the one who believes she's worthless, when actually it's a red herring to Rhys and the fact that he eventually dies for everyone.
Right, and he's really the one with the lowest self-worth.
Oh, yeah. You think you don't have self-worth, babe? Gotcha. I'm gonna die for everyone. Take that, bitch.
Challenge accepted.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince's wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Feyre eventually gives up on the fight with Rhys regarding the Mortal Queens, realizing that, quote, of course he would have been working against Hybern while I was away. Had I expected them all to be sitting on their asses for over a month? But when you think about it, of course this is what Feyre would assume, that everyone would wait for her to finish her dirty work before they did anything. Because that's what her human family did when Feyre was human and hunted in the forest. No one did anything while she did all the hard work.
Do you feel like her feelings were probably slightly hurt?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I would totally be hurt so you guys just didn't sit around and wait for me?
Oh, you found useful things to do?
You lived your life without me? That's kind of rude.
You didn't wait for me?
You guys should have had, daily vigils for me.
But I wanted to be involved.
Guys. And that's why we're not characters in a high fantasy book. The spice finally starts, but first Feyre lowers her mental shields for Rhys just as his own drop. They both enter this with an emotional vulnerability we don't normally see with these two. When Rhys tells Feyre he loves her, she begins to cry, and just like he did under the mountain, Rhys licks her tears away. Just like then, Rhys is distracting her, bringing her out of her mental funk. He wants to make her laugh, or at the very least not cry. Rhys takes Feyre to the bath, and in this scene, it just screams symbolism to me. Quote, my fingers were near black with dirt and caked blood. I cringed. I might need more than one bath to get clean. He snapped his fingers and my skin was instantly pristine again. We're met with another bathing scene, so we're back with this baptismal imagery. Feyre's hands are literally black with her sins, with blood and dirt. And this bathing scene, it's meant to be a fresh, clean start, a renewal. But it's no longer healing since Rhys magically removes the dirt from her, taking away the possibility of Feyre being even able to cleanse her sins. Although I'm not blaming him for this. I think it just shows that Feyre is not ready for her sins to be removed and that they remain. Rhys even says the essence of the dirt remains.
And we see this often, that Feyre is absolved of her actions by others, but internally Feyre does not necessarily feel that those sins are removed, or in actuality, those sins are not actually removed.
Yeah, and I think it also shows that she's not ready for them.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not mentally cleansed, and these are just markers of, we're not there yet. Yeah, we're not there yet. She hasn't healed. She's not ready for it.
Yeah. I have a comment about Feyre when she undresses. Feyre observes that, quote, sunlight streamed in through the steam rising from the tub, casting the space between us in golden white. Sunlight is here between Feyre and Rhys, not moonlight. We're beginning to see a shift in the imagery surrounding their relationship. The space is gold, just like the bond was gold in Thorns and Roses when Feyre swam back into life. The bond is also white, like the undimmable ray of light Feyre felt in the bond when she and Rhys first mated.
I agree with everything you just said. Now I'm going to look at it a different way. I think it shows that they're still off-kiltered. The fact that they're not being described as moonlight or stars or anything like that is normal for them. They are not in their natural element. Feyre is still not Feyre yet, and by not being in their normal moonlit setting, they're not where they're meant to be yet. Just because I said this doesn't mean I believe it. I was just curious to look at it a different way. I think you make good points later on in this book to support what you say.
You know, from my perspective, it's going back to what I said earlier, it's about truth. I think, as you said earlier, this is a rare moment of emotional intimacy and vulnerability that they're sharing. And I think that that's why we see the sunlight.
Yeah. The moonlit imagery and the stars, it never goes away.
Right.
It's still a part of them, but it's as if there's another layer that's recently been added for them.
Yeah. Rhys does grow impatient with Feyre's striptease, and like he once did in Mist and Fury, he uses his powers to slide, quote, invisible hands down my breasts between my legs. Now, this is hot, but in my view, maybe slightly problematic. Yes, we know they're both going to have sex and they both want it, but Feyre's doing a striptease physically apart to tease him. She didn't give him permission to touch her yet.
I mean, that's on her for not putting a mental shield to stop him. I mean, if
that's how the magic even works.
If that's how the magic even works. Because I've been reading a lot of smut and the ownership feels minimal to me here, but we're entering equal territory. They aren't bartering for information. They aren't trying to apologize or hide a secret. It's a couple who are finding comfort in one another, and that's empowering. The best part of being in a relationship is the playful naked touches, and Rhys gets to give her old ass a slap with his shadow hands. It's like fun, you know.
No, it's fun. I also had a dirty comment, but I'm trying to clean it up a little bit.
Why? Say it. Say it.
You said he gives her a good old slap on the ass with his shadow hands and with his shadow dick.
Hey, I'm just laughing where, you know, you're trying to clean, as if we're a class act over here.
We are not.
We're not a class act. But and then I'm over here thinking, why haven't we used shadow hands in other scenes with them?
Yeah, it's true. Continue to devolve.
And evolve. And devolve.
And devolve.
We really are neutral now. We kind of balanced out.
Rhys has some boundaries in this scene. As Feyre cleans herself, Rhys, quote, only gripped the threshold hard enough that the wood groaned beneath his hand. We always have to point out the thresholds. What does it mean to us here? Feyre says the restraint Rhys shows is part of the game, but I think it's more than that. I think that Rhys wants to respect Feyre as she cleans herself.
I think this is a moment of quality time. When Feyre and Rhys finally got together, they didn't have much time between them before they were torn apart. Now that they've been through some shit already, and while Feyre isn't completely who she needs to be, Rhys is there, standing at the threshold and ready to change and be a better mate. I think it's important that Rhys and not Feyre was at the threshold.
As Feyre finishes her act of cleaning and prepping, with Rhys watching all the while, she observes, quote, I could have sworn only darkness and stars swirled beyond his shoulders. A blink and they were gone. What the hell is this? I feel like it's a breadcrumb about something big about Rhys that we haven't seen come to fruition yet, but I know Jac has a more plausible theory.
It's the normal description of Rhys's wings before they come out, and we know that they have sex with his wings out. I don't know if his wings are out now, so I've always interpreted whenever we get the shadows behind them, it's, you know, he's about to unfurl the wings.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. We didn't mention this, but I was just thinking about it. We didn't add it to our notes, but when Rhys threatens to clean every inch of her with his tongue, that's not sexy because it's really gross.
It's gross.
Because there's blood and dirt on her.
Yeah.
And she gets, ooh, yeah.
No.
Like he's going to lick her and just go, Eris.
I can taste Eris's blood on you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the power dynamics of the sex scene. Consent is not an issue here. We know what Rhys wants, we know what Feyre wants. But though we all know they both want it, and Feyre has explicitly stated that she's, quote, ready for ravishing, Rhys withholds it.
Feyre herself gets hyped up for devouring him. Quote, I was going to devour him from head to toe. I was going to devour him. And Rhys slows that down. I think Rhys is making them both take a beat so that they can be present. Feyre has a history of using sex to heal, and while Rhys isn't against that, he also doesn't want to be a cheap distraction. Just like circa back in the inn when Feyre just says, I want a distraction, and he was put off by that. So it's not me assuming things about him, guys. It's, he said it before.
Yeah, no, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. I won't go into the details of what Rhys does. Jac can do that if she wants.
I can confirm that there wasn't much for me to analyze while he inserted a finger in her.
Thank you.
Yeah. There was no
analysis necessary.
No deeper meaning than a finger.
I do want to acknowledge Rhys withholds sex, and Feyre and Rhys both enjoy it. But when Feyre's done with the foreplay, she uses emotion and possession to get what she wants. You're mine, she says, which, quote, snapped the tether Rhys had kept on himself.
What I find to be interesting in this section is that it's Feyre who keeps claiming that Rhys is hers. Rhys only says once that she is his, but he doesn't initiate it. It's Feyre who says it, and Feyre's the one who says it more often. It's showing me that Feyre's the one who needs a tether. Feyre says it snaps his tether, and that's true, but Feyre's the one who needs it. Even in the next page, she gets off on his kneeling. Quote, the promise that he would kneel for no one and nothing but his crown and me, mine, he was mine. Feyre has had zero control or ownership of others until now, and she needs that after weeks of feeling so vulnerable.
And honestly, Rhys is probably the only one who's willing to be owned. Full stop. Tamlin was never willing to be owned by Feyre.
I think no one else has let Feyre need them. I think that everyone else has also been too independent. And not just in a romantic sense. I'll throw it to the sisters and to the friends where no one's let Feyre be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's on them. What they should do is just, put their leg in a cast and it's, sucker, guess what, Amy, you need me.
You can never let me go. Then the kissing and sex between Feyre and Rhys becomes claiming, wild, and unchecked. It was an unleashing. And all I can say is that they're a perfect match. The other thing I'll say is that this only works because they're equally matched on an emotional intimacy level. They are equally possessive of one another. Any imbalance on either side would make this a struggle for power.
Once Rhys is inside of Feyre, she says, quote, I thought I might explode into moonlight and flame, thought I might die from the sheer force of what swept through me. Remember when I said earlier that they are in their element when moon and stars are involved? And the idea of violence and death, it brings them closer to release and love.
This next part is too big for me to leave in the breadcrumbs, so we're going to talk about the conversation Feyre and Rhys have about never again being apart. First off, this foreshadows Rhys's death toward the end of the novel. More importantly, however, it initiates a string of conversations on the topic of Rhys's self-sacrificing nature and Feyre's unwillingness to let Rhys sacrifice himself. As we mentioned before, this certainly feels hypocritical on Feyre's part, since she would rather be sacrificed than Rhys. But let's also think about it in the context Jac spoke about last week, that death is the ultimate loyalty. The thing is that Feyre doesn't demand that of Rhys. It is enough that he wants to. We saw this with Lucien as well before. In fact, Feyre doesn't really want anyone's death and would rather substitute it for her own so long as the individual is willing to give their life freely to Feyre. It's almost performative. Let's also talk about the last thing that happens in this scene. Quote, never again, I promised him, and whispered it over and over as the sunlight drifted across the floor. Sunlight again is present at key moments of Feyre and Rhys's bonding, recharacterizing what was once shrouded in darkness. As they continue to be true to themselves and each other, sunlight will continue to play a role.
And Feyre ends on such a Han Solo note. Rhys is telling her he missed her and never wants to be apart, and she says, I know. I know is never an acceptable answer.
No, it's not.
I would have lost my shit.
You know what?
What?
I don't know.
I know.
Screw you.
Was that not where we were going with it?
No.
Okay. I was just imagining if my ex had said that.
Oh, yeah, you would
cry
have
for
lost it.
days.
Yeah.
Cried. I'd get mad. I'd get quiet.
Well, it's like...
I'd cry for days.
Or like, Jac gives me this intense stare of like, you didn't say what I needed you to say back. Mm-hmm. Like, you pay me a compliment and I say thank you and you're like, you're supposed to say it back to me.
You know, it's about mutual exchange and respect. I tell you and all my friends how pretty they are all the time.
I tell you look pretty.
After I ask for it.
No, I do it other times too, but there are times that you expect it back, and I didn't realize you expected it back.
I was listening to some parts of season 2, and I get mad on the show of that you didn't tell me that my hair was clean.
Or there's other parts where, I feel like there's something from season 2 where it was like me dying for you or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, you weren't willing to do it, probably.
Oh, yeah. Would you kill for me? It's probably yes, of course I would.
I am Feyre. I expect the death and loyalty from all.
Yeah, you are. We learn at the start of chapter 15 that Nesta and Elaine have been staying in the House of Wind. How apropos. Where Rhys and Feyre prefer smaller, comfortable spaces, Feyre's sisters prefer larger spaces like their manor in the human realms. Did we talk about this in season 2? I can't remember, but I feel like we did. Likewise, true to Archeron family dynamics, Feyre is the one who goes to Nesta and Elaine, just as she is the one who always does the work, or is perceived to be the only one who does the work, to see her sisters.
It just screams family issues. Quote, they did not ask for anything or anyone, so I would go to them. Right off the bat, we are in old family dynamics, and Feyre is the one who's making an effort, the one who's going to them.
And I think that sets up the readers to be annoyed with Nesta and Elaine. Because haven't the readers always been annoyed with Nesta and Elaine?
Yes, and I think we do... I think we do a really great job in the rest of this chapter, though, of saying, no, you're being really biased right now, Feyre.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine, why would Feyre expect her sisters to leave their safe space and come to her in a city of Fae that they don't know or trust? Of course you go to them, Feyre. It's all about having the right mental attitude, and she does not have it.
Agreed. It's obvious since she prioritized sex over checking on her sisters.
Ugh.
Before Feyre goes to the House of Wind, she finds Cassian, Azriel, and Lucien on the first floor of the townhouse. Note that Cassian and Azriel are seated in the dining room, eating lunch, watching Lucien. Lucien sits in the opposite room, with no mention of lunch. Obviously, from a food is power perspective, Lucien is the least powerful in the room. Cassian and Azriel are exerting their power. But let me remind you, Lucien's been starving as much as Feyre this past week. It's kind of cruel to not feed him too. This is emphasized by the fact that Lucien still has not been able to bathe or change clothes since arriving. He's not being treated like a guest yet. He's basically a prisoner. And hold on to that thought, because I'm going to bring it up again soon.
It's so not cool. She could have easily have told Rhys, oh no, I forgot to tell them to feed him or something, and he could have just sent a little mental note. They never had to leave their bedroom.
No.
Feyre is straight up savage here. Quote, I fought my cringe as I halted in the threshold. Lucien was still in his travel-worn, filthy clothes. His face and hands, at least, were clean, but I should have gotten him something else. Remembered to offer him. The thought rippled away into nothing as Rhys appeared at my side. Lucien is starving, dirty, and tired, and everyone had to sit around and wait for Feyre to get clean and sexed up before they can even deal with them. But what makes this scene even worse to me is how Feyre totally dismisses that thought the second Rhys shows up.
Oh, it's bad.
It's very bad.
It's very bad.
You just had sex with him. You can take a beat and get this other guy food and feel bad about it.
And clothes. Go take a shower. Why didn't anybody let him bathe?
I mean, I get why Cassian and Azriel didn't, because they don't like his brothers, so therefore they're going to take it out on Lucien.
But Moore's the one who took him.
I know. But Azriel and Cassian brought him back.
Yeah, but...
it's not a good move on the inner circle.
No. Nope.
It does not make them look good. I think that they all get a little bit too much on their high horse of their own morality in this book.
Yeah.
And this is just a great example of... there is a lot of flaws here.
Yeah.
But we as readers don't take the time to view that. And we just kind of idolize the inner circle as being like this awesome group of friends, which I do too. I mean, I totally do that.
Yeah, but I think as readers, we're just glad that Feyre's back, that they've been reunited. We're glad we got a smut scene so early in the book.
Yep.
That we disregard what's actually happening around them.
It's bad for Feyre. It's bad on Rhys. It's bad on every single person there to have let this starving, dirty man live his life there while everyone waited for them to finish.
Right.
Literally finish.
So before we even see Lucien, Feyre and Rhys have a ring exchange in their bedroom. Love and violence go hand in hand once again in this exchange. Feyre describes the act as, quote, more intimate and searing than any publicly made vows. Searing like burning, singeing, branding. Then Feyre jokes that she should drop off Rhys's ring in the Weaver's cottage and make him retrieve it. A callback to Mist and Fury when Feyre retrieved her own ring from the Weaver's cottage. For once, I'm going to agree with Feyre on this choice of violence.
The number of times I would have used that to guilt Rhys into stuff. Nope, we're going to get sushi again because remember that time you made me get that damn ring? I don't care if this is the 5th night this week. We do whatever I want. But also note what Rhys says, quote, perhaps I could find some other creature for him to battle, one that wouldn't delight in removing my favorite part of his body. If I was Feyre, I would have acted surprised and just said to Rhys, really? I didn't know the Weaver was so interested in tongues. Take that by me complimenting another part of you.
When Feyre and Rhys present themselves to Lucien, rings on their fingers, and Lucien sneers, Rhys threatens Lucien. Feyre responds by getting hot and bothered. Quote, something twisted in my gut at the threat, the smooth, sleek aggression. In the context of the book, this could read as Feyre being worried about Lucien. But I think that's not what's happening, especially when you look at how aggression is characterized, not as something dark and unwanted, but as something alluring, like Rhys himself. I think Feyre's turned on at Rhys's threat of violence, and she has to talk herself back from it by reminding herself that Lucien's not an enemy. To back myself up, When Lucien and Rhys start to argue about Feyre being taken from Tamlin on their wedding day, Rhys reveals his wings. Feyre gets so turned on she can barely stand. Quote, Rhys bared his teeth. My limbs turned light, trembling at the dark power curling in the corners of the room. Not fear, never fear of him.
Swoon. Yeah. Reading the exchange between Lucien and Rhys is fascinating to me because I think it's safe to say that Lucien relates to Rhys at this moment, to have a mate who's in love with someone else. But Lucien gets defensive and Rhys explains himself, and I'm wondering how much of this interaction is Lucien trying to distance his situation from Rhys, or maybe Lucien is just kicking the so-called tires of the car. He's testing it out. Quote, how fortunate that you got what you wanted in the end. That's what Lucien was saying. I think he's hoping so too. When Rhys calls Lucien out for not helping Feyre, he says, quote, my mate may one day find it in herself to forgive him, forgive you, but I will never forget how it felt to sense her terror in those moments. My cheeks heated, especially as Cassian and Azriel stalked closer. Feyre gets embarrassed about Rhys calling out her trauma, and I'm not sure how I feel about Rhys using Feyre's trauma in his defense. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Rhys didn't experience his own trauma and pain by feeling her pain and knowing that there wasn't anything for him to do. That's valid for his argument. But he is putting Feyre's hurt on display to the point that Cassian and Azriel are now hearing about it for the first time.
It's not appropriate.
No.
It's just not. He needed to limit his supporting arguments to his experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not appropriate to utilize somebody else's experience that was shared with you in confidence. And actually wasn't even shared with him in confidence. It was shared through the bond.
Yeah.
Feyre didn't get a choice.
No. It was a moment of domestic violence. And Feyre doesn't owe it to anyone to share that story if she doesn't want to.
No, not at all.
Doesn't matter how close she is with Azriel and Cassian. That's her experience. And Rhys doesn't get to use that publicly, throw that around. If it was private, yes. I think it's a fair thing for Rhys to say, like, hey, man, you were there while she was being abused and you did nothing. Totally. But it's that public factor of it where you don't get to wave around her trauma.
Yeah, for others to hear about who weren't involved.
Exactly.
As we discussed, everyone's treating Lucien poorly, and Feyre is too. She's treating him poorly for someone who helped keep her alive after fleeing the Spring Court. Though Feyre offers to take Lucien to the House of Wind, she again fails to treat Lucien with respect. Quote, the quick walk up to the roof of the townhouse served as Lucien's tour of my home. I didn't bother to point out the bedrooms. On one hand, shame on Feyre. On the other hand, if we think about the bedrooms as symbols, those are typically the inner sanctum or sanctuary for an individual. Naturally, Feyre doesn't want Lucien to know where her bedroom is or what's inside of it because she's not sure if Lucien can be trusted, whether he's friend or foe, after the fight he and Rhys just had.
Remember in Thorns and Roses we talked about a TikTok theory that Tamlin didn't show Feyre his bedroom because he was hiding his true self, just like Feyre is doing right now. Feyre and Tamlin are similar again.
Good call out. I want to make a case here that I think may be important and that I'll kind of bring up again at the end of the episode. Lucien is starting a journey not unlike Feyre's. What do I mean? In Thorns and Roses, Feyre was taken from her family to the Spring Court. Prythian was unlike anything she'd ever been taught to believe. Feyre was also treated not unlike a prisoner at times, and information was withheld from her. In Mist and Fury, the cycle repeated. Feyre was taken from what she thought was her home in the Spring Court and forced to visit the Night Court and interact with unfamiliar people due to her bargain with Rhys. Though she eventually made the decision to go to the Night Court permanently and realized it was nothing like she'd been taught to believe it would be, for a long time, information was once again withheld from her. We're seeing something similar take place with Lucien here. Lucien has left the only place he's ever felt safe, from the only family he thought he had, to this unfamiliar place, a place he believed to be something that it isn't. He will get some information, but not all the information, all the time, and he'll be treated like a prisoner for some part of it. And remember, upon his arrival to Velaris, he hears children laughing in the street, just like Feyre did.
Yep.
Remember these points for the end of the episode.
Yep. While flying, Feyre thinks about the House of Wind. Quote, in the House of Wind, my other home, the grand formal sister to the townhouse, or a public home, I suppose, a far more pleasant alternative to my other residence, the Court of Nightmares. At least I could stay at the Moonstone Palace high atop the mountain. And she's not even thinking about the cabin. Girl went from having a hovel to 4 homes. Good for her. And it's a moment that means a lot to her. It shows that sense of stability and home. I also think about the Moonstone Palace a lot, that's where Feyre first went to the Night Court, and we don't really go back there.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Which is strange.
I mean, it's the first bathtub description that we had. I would go back for that tub.
I would too.
Yeah.
She can winnow.
She can winnow.
I just need to go take a bath. Bye.
Yeah, right? Like, I'm going to take a beat. I'm going to go to take a bath. You're telling me that you're going to have like a regular tub when you have that infinity tub that looks like it's going over the mountain?
Yeah, no.
That's where they should have gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
That's where they could have had sex in the pool.
Oh, yeah.
Feyre and Rhysand tell Lucien their story once they're at the House of Wind. When they're done, Lucien reflects on how everything he's known about Rhysand and the Night Court has been a lie.
Lucien is clearly rocked by this admission, but I also think it's shocking, although certainly believable, that Lucien would believe this so quickly. No one here has to prove to Lucien what they're saying is true. Instead, he accepts it. I think this has to do with Lucien's understanding of Tamlin and how people really aren't what they seem.
I agree with you. I do have to say the placement of this conversation feels odd to me.
Yeah.
It felt like it had to be done, and it was just like, oh, here's a convenient place.
I agree. I wish I had more of it, too. I mean, it's a summary, and what are we going to get from it? You know, it's everything that we already heard, and it's a good summary, but it's weird. It's a lot of threat. Let's fly over here. Now it's time for me to tell you what happened.
Yeah, now let me spill my guts.
Yeah.
It's odd.
Like you said, it had to happen.
Right.
It had to happen before meeting Nesta and Elaine, but just weird timing.
Yeah. As this summary of Feyre and Rhys's past is wrapped up, there are some odd comments that are made about Amren, and I want to discuss those. One of the biggest themes of this novel is the monster within. Some of the groundwork for Amren and her monster begins here. We learn from Lucien that, quote, Amren is a bedtime story they told us as younglings to make us behave. Amren was who would drink my blood and carry me to hell if I acted out of line. First of all, terrifying.
Yeah.
Second of all, I aspire to be her.
I knew that was going to be your second of all. In my heart, I was about to mouth it, and you said it, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks. We already know Amren is considered a monster, but how we see her change and the new sides of her that we see are just one of the more obvious examples of how we're going to see the monster inside a lot of the characters in this novel. Feyre being just one of the others we've begun to be exposed to. We see a little bit of this again with Lucien. Quote, I hadn't realized I was a villain in your narrative. What this quote illustrates to me is that sometimes we don't know our inner monster. Lucien didn't know the impact he was having on Feyre's life. In some ways, it's just like Feyre does not understand the impact she was having on the Spring Court when she made the choices she made.
Also, the self-awareness and the willingness to accept that he was the villain in another story is huge. It shows me that Lucien is a good guy. He has the ability to grow because he's capable of humility and accepting when he's wrong.
I think it's a great point.
He doesn't even fight it.
No.
I mean, it takes one debriefing from Feyre for him to get it. Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. I think it also speaks to the fact that he was probably reflecting a lot on his actions after she left.
I'd say he's probably one of the more emotionally intelligent and developed characters.
Yeah.
Which, I'm sorry, again, checkpoint to OTP.
Feyre, unfortunately, perpetuates Lucien's view of himself as a villain when she tries to comfort him. Quote, I almost patted his shoulder, almost said something reassuring, but words failed me again as I headed for the dim interior of the house. At the Spring Court, Feyre and Lucien were super chummy in their effort to take down the Hybern commanders. Yet now, when Lucien's alone and away from all he knows, when he needs his friend the most, Feyre struggles to have empathy for him. Why?
I don't know. Feyre and how she views Lucien is so back and forth in this book. Mm-hmm. She goes from, you're my enemy, to you're like a friend, to I don't feel guilty, to, oh shit, I kind of feel guilty. I think that subconsciously, though, she recognizes that Lucien is in the same house with her sister. And there's a certain amount of protectiveness that's going on there.
Yeah.
With Nesta, it's a very obvious outward-facing protectiveness. I think these might be more of Feyre's subtleness.
Yeah, I can see that. I felt like they made connections during their escape into the Autumn Court. They were capable of respecting each other again. And I think you're right that by being in close proximity to her sister, their Fae instincts are kicking in, right? Lucian's the mate. He's going to want Elaine. And Feyre is going to be protective of her sister. I think also, because she's being protective, to what extent is Feyre connecting Lucian and Tamlin again in her mind? A subconscious way to keep her guard up. I don't know.
I think you're right, though, the connecting of Lucian and Tamlin together, which then makes her protective of Elaine because, you don't want to mix the Tamlin of it all. But at the same time, Lucian's a lot more like Rhys than he is like Tamlin in that situation. Yeah, it's kind of the age-old thing amongst in-laws and then the partner. That's my husband. Well, that's my sister. I mean, I don't know what I just said. That's my wife. That's my mate. That's my sister. It's like, who gets the bigger claim there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Having had this fight with my own sister-in-law before. I've known my brother his entire life.
But people change.
Yeah.
And there's been other family members that I have that claim that they know someone when in actuality their partner knows better. But Lucian doesn't know Elaine.
Lucian does not know Elaine. The reunion of the Archeron sisters is not an emotional, sappy one. But we should already expect that, shouldn't we? Let's think about all the times in these novels that Feyre and her sisters have been reunited. Think back on Thorns and Roses. When Feyre and her sisters were all still human, Feyre returned from the spring court at Tamlin's insistence. Though Elaine had been glamored to not know where Feyre was, Nesta had an inkling. The reunion was not emotional nor happy. In fact, Nesta was not trusting of Feyre to start. Yet Feyre and Nesta bonded before Feyre disappeared again to return to the spring court. Elaine spoke of going to the continent with Feyre, and once Elaine remembered the truth of Feyre's whereabouts, wept at their farewell. So there was a little bit of emotion there, but only when they separated again, not at their reunion. In Mist and Fury, Nesta was standoffish when Feyre appeared at their estate. This time, Elaine wept at the sight of Feyre, but it was mostly because she was probably shocked Feyre was alive when they had presumed her dead, and the fact that Feyre is now no longer human. Neither sister was willing to give up their human life, though they were ultimately forced to. So again, not tons of emotion. For a third time, the sisters are reunited. Nesta is not happy to see Feyre, and Elaine is wasting away. Their journeys into immortality have begun, and the sisters, maybe for the first time, are on a more level playing field, yet their relationships might be at the most fraught that they've ever been at this point.
I don't disagree with you. I'm wondering, for Nesta's sake, if her greeting to Feyre is all that cold, or at least unhappy. This is all from Feyre's eyes, so I'll try to break it down. When Nesta sees Feyre, her back straightens, a sign of formality, defensiveness, and protection, but not outwardly hostile. Nesta's eyes don't widen when she sees Feyre. Feyre was expecting surprise, and that's on Feyre, but Nesta doesn't glare or narrow her eyes either. She just takes her sister in. Keep in mind, Feyre is taking everything in about Nesta at this point. Her clothes, her hair, her ears. Nesta isn't dumb. She can probably feel the observations being made. Who wouldn't feel uncomfortable if someone walks in the room and just stares at you at every little aspect of you? Quote, "She sized us up and said to me, 'You're back.'" This comment isn't hostile comment, but let's think about the fact that Nesta looks at Cassian first and then Feyre and then says, "You're back." I think Nesta understood that Feyre was in danger and that Cassian probably put himself in danger to get Feyre. It makes her emotional, which is why her next response is so hostile. And Nesta doesn't even go into the hostile territory until she looks at Cassian and says, "What do you want?" Which is clearly her being defensive against Cassian, not Feyre. Feyre is seeing what she wants to see. If she was expecting a warm greeting from her sister, that was never going to be Nesta. There were underlining expectations because what we feel is defensiveness and hurt from Feyre. In the next page, when Cassian mentions Feyre destroying their enemies, quote, "Nesta whirled to me. 'You accomplished it?' I clenched my jaw. We'll see how it plays out. I made sure Ianthe suffered. At the hint of rage and fear that crept into Nesta's eyes, I amended, 'Not enough.' There are moments when Nesta lashes out, quote, 'What do I care? I get to be young and beautiful forever.' And perhaps I should thank you for dragging me into this." Nesta is scared and hurt, and no one is cutting her a break, especially Rhys. His whole protectiveness of Feyre in the scene really pisses me off. Sometimes we perpetuate the same system by entering a situation with negative expectations of the other person's actions. Also, let's look at this from a broader view. If you were Nesta and the last time you saw your sister, you've been traumatized and forced to become the very thing you hate, and your sister finally comes home after a month in enemy territory and comes home, but the first thing she needs to do is have sex before seeing you, it would piss me off. I'm not saying that I would do differently because Feyre isn't super close to her sisters, but I think it's just food for thought.
Yeah, I do wonder if Nesta knows that they have sex, but I mean, she has Fey senses now. She probably can smell it on her.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they always kind of hint to, you can smell the satisfaction between the two of them. Or I think they've also described it as you can smell or you can see or sense the mating bond.
Or the arousal.
Yeah. That's like more intense. And I think it's also a fair assumption.
Yeah, I think it is too. But this is a crappy situation for the sisters to be in. But despite saying that, I am excited to talk about the relationship between the sisters as the novel progresses. Because now that they've hit their lowest, they can only go up from here. And I do remember...
That's what you think. Silver flames.
Oh, it's true. For this book.
Yeah.
For this book, they've hit their lowest. And there are moments between the sisters that make me emotional every time I read them. Where fear and mortality held Nesta and Elaine back in the past, once we get over that fear and the grief over the life they left behind, the three of them will be so much more powerful together. But the low is pretty low right now.
Oh, yeah.
I will say, as an aside, I love the characterization of Nesta in the scene. Quote, she turned to Cassian, looked him over as if she were a queen on a throne. Quote, she snapped every inch the conquering empress. I think everything about Nesta and Cassian-Nesta interactions is a lot of expertly executed setup for Silver Flames.
And Cassian is out here teasing Nesta about being a romance reader, which is only part of why so many of us relate to Nesta. But I also have a lot of questions, Amy, with this. Mm-hmm. So there's romance authors then in this world.
Yes.
There are writers in this world who write for fun and passion. That means they're like, are they self-published? Is there a publishing house? Is it Sexy Chicken Publishing House?
Oh my gosh. A branch off of the lingerie shop.
Yeah, it's like Sexy Chicken Lingerie Publishing Romance Group. No, but really, that means there's...
I don't know. I don't know the answers.
No, neither do I.
In season 2, we made a case for how Elaine and Feyre are going to have parallel journeys. We see a lot of early Feyre, specifically Thorns and Roses Feyre, in Elaine during Mist and Fury. I think a case can be made for how we're going to see Mist and Fury Feyre in Elaine during Wings and Ruin. Not exactly, but the parallels are there, so let me run through them. Elaine is now Fae, just as Feyre had been remade by the start of Mist and Fury. Elaine has become disconnected from the only identity she's had, and it's seen in this observation, quote, her hair was down, not even braided. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen it unbound. This is just like Feyre in Mist and Fury, who had the identity of Cursebreaker without feeling like it actually fit her. Elaine also wears Grayson's engagement ring, as Feyre once wore Tamlin's engagement ring. Yet Elaine wears moon-white silk in this scene, a symbol of the Night Court and not of her humanity, and has also become so pale that it makes Feyre think of, quote, the color of death, of sorrow, the lack of color, of vibrancy. Then I beheld the hollowed-out cheeks, the bloodless lips, the brown eyes, that now seemed utterly dull, like grave dirt. This description of Elaine reminds me keenly of the Feyre who suffered in the Spring Court and was whisked away to the Night Court in Mist and Fury. We know that Elaine suffers from her trauma and from her separation from her previous life, not unlike how Feyre suffered from the trauma of being under the mountain and the choices she made there, feeling undeserving of her new life. I think this explains why Rhys is gentle with Elaine and not Nesta, because he sees the similarities between Feyre and Elaine. This is just the start of what I think is going to be a very interesting journey for Elaine, one I'm very excited to uncover as we continue this season.
I'm going to make a few other points about Lucien and Elaine. The first thing that's written when Feyre walks into the room is, quote, the suite was filled with sunlight. And remember, what do both their names mean? Light. And this is the first time they really get to see each other post-transition. Yes, Feyre talks about Grayson, but we set the scene up for Lucien and Elaine to match perfectly. I saw this on TikTok from user aurorasandsadpros.13. And she made some good points. She talks about the whole light thing, which I want to say I literally Googled just the day before, which is freaky. But she made a point that made me squeal. What's another thing that Lucien and Elaine have in common? The gift of sight. Lucien with his eye.
And she's a seer.
And she's a seer.
Good point.
Good job, aurorasandsadpros.13.
A thought I just had while you were saying that. Elaine and Lucian mean light, Grayson is literally gray.
My eyes just got so wide.
Yes, they did.
But,
Anyway.
and then what's Azriel all about? Shadows.
And Azriel's the name of the angel of death, I think.
Yeah. But, I mean, yeah, like, but his whole thing is shadows.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping ahead, so Silver Flames, spoiler if you haven't read Silver Flames. But again, I'm not saying that Azriel and Gwen are OTP. I'm not there yet, haven't done the analysis. But Gwen hangs out in the catacombs of the library in shadows. She's comfortable in shadows.
Yeah.
All right, now you've skipped and you come back. Ultimately, yeah, OTP-ness. I'm excited because there's a highlighted point, which I don't get to read until you tell me.
Yes, I'm going to make more points about Lucian and Elaine here in a second. But before I get there, I think it's important to highlight Feyre's guilt at seeing Elaine as hollow and empty as she is right now. Quote, I couldn't get enough air in. I couldn't breathe looking at this broken, carved out thing my sister had become. What I'd robbed her of, what I'd taken from her. Just because Feyre got her revenge doesn't mean her sisters are all right. Feyre didn't solve the problem by taking down the Spring Court. I think this is the start of Feyre gaining a little more self-awareness. That good doesn't always win just because you have the power and you think you have the right morals. It's a long journey Feyre is going to have to take to come to accept this and her role in everything. And now my last note, one I am loath to make, but I'm going to put it in here anyway.
Let me get comfortable and look at you. Okay. I'm ready.
You can watch me roll my eyes.
Yep.
So I've been talking about how Feyre and Rhys are starting to be associated with sunlight. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to see something similar for Elaine and Lucian, whose names mean light. Both Elaine and Lucian are on journeys similar to Feyre, in a way, and both are going to be characterized by and associated with sunlight and gold. We see that in Elaine's bedroom. Though she wears moon-white clothes, she keeps trying to bring in the sun. She wears moon white because, like Feyre and Rhys in Mist and Fury, she has not yet come around to the truth or to the bond that she could have. In the next chapter that we're going to cover next week, the first thing that we notice in Lucian's bedroom is the sunlight. I hate to say it, but they might be OTP.
Well, also, you keep mentioning the dress. What is it that when mates that we've been seeing consistently when they have sex for the first time or when they accept the bond, they glow?
Yeah.
And it's almost as if she's already has that white light surrounding her with that dress.
Yeah. I hate it.
OTP.
Now let's get to some breadcrumbs.
I will say, spoiler to some SJM universe. So if you have not read other SJM books, please skip ahead. In chapter 14, when Feyre introduces Lucian to Amren as Lucian Van Serra, quote, Lucian stiffened. I don't use my family name. I suspected he ceased using that name the moment his lover's heart had stopped beating. Or is it a clue that Lucian's not really of Van Serra bloodline, whether or not he knows it?
Again, another disclaimer about multiverse. Move ahead. Also in chapter 14, as Feyre climaxes during sex, quote, it left my skin glowing like a newborn star in its wake. If she is not starborn, nobody is.
Chapter 15, quote, Rhys had mentioned no signs of special powers from either of my sisters. Yet that day in Highburn, when Nesta had opened her eyes, I'd seen it, seen something great and terrible within them. And that's the entire premise of Silver Flames, folks. Thank you. Welcome. Come again.
Yeah, it is. When I read this book, I always feel like I'm partially reading Silver Flames because there's so much setup.
SJM said something in one of her interviews that in order to get herself through one book, she's outlining the next book at the same time. Boy, does she.
Yeah, it
Boy,
shows.
Does she.
Also in chapter 15, when Cassian is talking about Lucian and Elaine, he says, quote, you come between a male and his mate, Nesta Archeron, and you're going to learn about the consequences the hard way. Nesta's nostrils flared. Cassian only gave her a crooked grin. It's because he's talking about them.
And she knows it. Because they both know. I mean, that's the whole thing in Silver Flames is that we find out that they both know, but she doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah.
And he won't give it to her. So he's hinting at it.
Yeah.
He's saying it. So now we're going to go into the next breadcrumb where we speak of Father Archeron. Quote, seeing as he hadn't sent word from the continent in months, I'll worry about that later. I sniped back and thanked the cauldron for it, that he was off trading in some lucrative territory or raising an army.
And thank the Lord he does.
I feel like he should have warned them.
Yeah.
Hey, girls, raising an army.
Love you, bye.
Love you.
Still in chapter 15, quote, he'll be looking for me, she whispered. That was Elaine, and Feyre assumes she's talking about her fiancé, but I think she might be talking about the King of Hybern.
Yep. That's how I always interpreted it.
That was your note.
I know, but thank you for giving me that credit. That's how I always imagined it, though.
Yeah.
The last breadcrumb in chapter 15, quote, Elaine had always been gentle and sweet, and I considered it a different sort of strength, a better strength. Maybe once Elaine has reached her full Fae potential, she will be even stronger than Feyre.
And that's my theory.
That was your theory.
So going back to our question, what is the impact of previous misconceptions that perpetuate misunderstandings?
I think we see a lot of that with the sisters and how Feyre expects them to act a certain way. I think we see that with Feyre expecting her reunion with Rhys to be a certain way. You know, I think when we were coming up with this question, we were originally saying, how much of a hypocrite is Feyre?
Yeah.
And all of it, she has all these misconceptions and she's a total hypocrite in this early section of the book and in these chapters in particular. And it sets it up for misguided understandings.
Yeah, and I think we also see that not only with the sisters, but with Lucien, that all of a sudden, now that Feyre's back with her family, the inner circle, they have misconceptions of who Lucien is. We see that when Rhys comes in his mask, basically, and that colors Feyre's interaction with Lucien, who she should be treating respectfully since they both went through a week of hell together.
Yeah.
But instead, she allows everyone else's misconceptions of who Lucien is to influence how she treats him.
Yeah, she really lets people treat Lucien like crap. But what has Lucien ever done to anyone else?
Nothing that I know of.
Nothing. They judge him for his brother being Eris and for Tamlin being his friend. And Rhys is probably the only one who has something where, you know, Lucien wasn't able to help Feyre in the times that she needed it. But again, we've discussed that he has his own trauma and no one's willing to dive into that.
Or acknowledge it.
Or acknowledge at all. Just like we didn't acknowledge it in the second book.
Right. And shame on us, shame on them.
I mean, yeah, but, you know, more shame on them. And here's this week's weekly podcast review.
This is from Great Life, Love Life, Fun Life.
Oh my God, that's such a great name.
And the subject is, I love, love, love this.
I love life.
I love, love, love them.
Yeah.
I have such an interest in literary analysis. It being done on one of my favorite series. Are you kidding? I love this so much and couldn't recommend it enough. I am learning and thinking about new ideas I never even thought of.
Oh my God.
Warms my heart.
When I tell you, we read these all the time.
And go, oh.
I know, both of us are wiping our eyes over here.
Yeah, seriously.
Thank you for loving the podcast and leaving a review. I think you and I were so surprised how many people want to interpret literature.
Yeah. I thought it was only for real, like, deep nerddom.
Turns out we're all nerds. There's just so many of us.
And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that everyone is joining this journey with us. And you know what? Your guys' reviews are the highlight of my day.
And if you would like your review to be featured, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a written review.
Thanks.
Ideally 5-star, please. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be exploring chapters 16 through 18 of A Court of Wings and Ruin.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. Bye.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.